Ellie Crawford's fingers had turned white. She'd stopped feeling them an hour ago. The 14 cents in her palm caught the last light from the dying depot lamp. All the money she had in the world. All the lies her uncle had left her with. She was 10 years old, and she was going to die on Christmas Eve. Then she heard hoofbeats cutting through the blizzard. A man's voice, rough but not unkind. "Anyone here?" She tried to answer. Her jaw wouldn't move. If you want to know if Ellie survives this night, subscribe to my channel and follow her story to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far Ellie's journey has traveled. The cold had stopped hurting 2 hours ago. That's when Ellie knew she was in real trouble. She'd read somewhere, no, that wasn't right. She couldn't read. Her uncle had made sure of that. But she'd heard the ranch hands talking once back when Papa was alive. They'd said when the cold stopped hurting, that's when it started killing. Ellie spread the coins across the frozen bench one more time. 14 cents. She'd counted them so many times she could feel the shape of each one even though her fingers had gone numb. The depot master had laughed at her, actually laughed. "Ain't no prepaid fare, girl. Your uncle's note ain't worth the paper it's written on. And there ain't no train coming tonight neither." Storms shut down the whole line. Then he'd locked up his office and left. Just like that. Didn't even look back. The oil lamp above her head flickered twice, then died. Darkness swallowed everything except the sound of wind shrieking through the depot eaves and the smell of coal smoke from the train that had already gone. The temperature had dropped past 20 below an hour ago. Maybe more now. Ellie couldn't tell anymore. She pulled Papa's pocket watch from inside her coat. The metal should have been cold, but it felt warm against her chest, where she'd kept it pressed close to her heart. She traced the engraving on the back with fingers that couldn't feel anything anymore. She didn't know what the letters said, but she'd memorized every curve and line. Papa had given it to her the morning the mine collapsed. Pressed it into her hands like it was the most important thing in the world. "Keep this safe, Ellie girl. If anything ever happens to me, if you're ever alone and scared, you find Jacob Hollister at Broken Creek Ranch. Show him this watch. He'll know what to do." Papa had been wrong about a lot of things, but he'd never been wrong about people. 8 months later, Ellie was sitting on a frozen bench in the middle of nowhere, waiting to die, because her uncle had decided she was worth more dead than alive. She understood now. The $18,000 Papa left her, she'd heard Uncle Marcus talking about it when he thought she was asleep. Heard him telling that scary man with the gold rings that he'd handle the situation, that she'd never make it to 18. The scary man had laughed. Said something about how accidents happen all the time to little girls who don't have anyone looking out for them. Uncle Marcus had brought her to the depot 3 days before Christmas. Handed her a note and $1.14. Told her the orphanage in Helena was expecting her, that the fare was prepaid, that she'd be better off with the nuns. "Be a good girl now, Eleanor. Don't cause trouble." Then he'd ridden away without looking back. The ticket master had taken one look at the note and laughed. Now Ellie was alone in the dark, and the cold had stopped hurting, and she was going to die holding her father's watch because there was nothing else left to hold. She closed her eyes. That's when she heard the hoofbeats. Pug. At first she thought she was dreaming. The cold did that to you, made you hear things that weren't there, see things that couldn't be real. But the sound got louder, closer. Hooves crunching through crusted snow, steady and sure, despite the storm. A horse materialized out of the blizzard, massive thing breath, steaming white in the frozen air. The man who dismounted moved careful like he'd done this 100 times in weather that killed careless folk. He wore a heavy coat dusted thick with snow, hat pulled low against the wind. She couldn't see his face, but his voice carried over the storm when he called out. "Anyone here?" Ellie tried to answer. Her jaw wouldn't work right. Muscles too frozen to form words. She managed a sound that might have been yes, or might have been nothing at all. Boots crunched closer. The man knelt at bench level, putting his face where she could see it without moving her head. Weathered skin, maybe late 50s, with gray eyes that didn't miss much. Deep lines around his mouth and forehead. Not a soft man. Not a cruel one either. Those eyes went to her hands still clutching the coins. Then to the watch. He froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Just the wind howling and the snow falling, and this stranger staring at her father's watch like he'd seen a ghost. "That's Thomas Crawford's watch." Not a question. His voice had changed, gone tight with something she couldn't name. Ellie's heart stuttered. Nobody had called Papa by his full name in months. Uncle Marcus just called him, "your father," like it was a curse word. "Where's your daddy, child?" "Dead." The word came out slurred, her lips too numb to form it right. 8 months now. Mine collapsed. The man's face did something complicated. He reached slow for the watch, not grabbing, just reaching, and turned it over. Read the engraving in what little light filtered through the storm clouds. His hands were shaking, but not from cold. "You're Eleanor." She nodded. Couldn't manage more than that. "Ellie. Papa called me Ellie." Something broke in the man's expression. Not breaking down, breaking open. Like a wall coming apart to show what was hidden behind it. "I'm Jacob Hollister." His voice was rough. "Your daddy and I were partners. Built a ranch together from nothing. He was the best friend I ever had." Ellie felt tears freezing on her cheeks. She hadn't cried in months, not since Uncle Marcus told her crying was for babies, and slapped her hard enough to make her ears ring. "Papa said to find you, said you'd know what to do." He was right. Jacob pulled a blanket from his saddle. Thick wool that smelled like horse and leather, and something warm she couldn't name. He wrapped it around her shoulders without touching more than he had to. "Can you stand?" She tried. Her legs buckled. "Then I'm going to lift you. That all right?" Nobody had asked her permission for anything in 8 months. Uncle Marcus just grabbed and pushed and slapped whenever he felt like it. This stranger, this friend of Papa's, was asking if it was all right to save her life. "Yes, sir." He picked her up like she weighed nothing. Settled her in front of the saddle, climbed up behind. His arms came around her to hold the reins, blocking the worst of the wind with his body. "There's a ranch about 5 miles west. Warm house, hot food. My sister Martha will look after you proper." He touched his heels to the horse's sides. "Hold on now, we're going home." Home. The word hit her harder than the cold ever had. They rode in silence for a while. Ellie pressed against Jacob's chest, wrapped in the blanket, feeling warmth slowly seep back into her bones. The horse moved steady through the drifts, finding its way by instinct, through darkness and snow. Finally Jacob spoke, voice low, barely audible over the wind. "What were you doing out here alone, Ellie?" "Uncle Marcus brought me." She had to force the words out through chattering teeth. "Said he was sending me to St. Catherine's orphanage in Helena. Said there was prepaid fare." "But there wasn't." "No, sir." Ticketmaster laughed, said the note was worthless. Then he locked up and left. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had gone cold as the wind. "Your uncle left you here to freeze." It wasn't a question. Ellie answered anyway. "I think so, sir. He owes money to a man named Drummond, scary man with gold rings. I heard them talking about Papa's trust fund, about how Uncle Marcus could get the money if I wasn't around to claim it when I turn 18. The arms around her tightened just slightly. Protective. "How old are you, Ellie?" 10, sir. 11 in March. And you figured all that out on your own about the money and Drummond?" "I listen, sir. Uncle Marcus thinks I'm stupid because I can't read, but I listen real good." Jacob made a sound low in his throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. "Your daddy always said you were the smartest thing he ever made. Smarter than him and me put together." A pause. He was right about that too. The horse crested a ridge, and suddenly Ellie could see lights below. Golden windows glowing warm against the white darkness. A ranch house, big and solid, with smoke rising from 2 chimneys. "That's Broken Creek," Jacob said. "That's home now, long as you want it to be." The door flew open before they reached the porch. A woman in her 50s stood silhouetted against the lamplight, gray hair pulled back tight, face sharp with worry. "Jake, what in God's name are you doing riding in weather like—" She stopped, saw Ellie bundled in Jacob's arms. "Sweet mercy, what happened?" "This is Thomas Crawford's daughter." Jacob dismounted, lifting Ellie down with careful hands. "Found her at the depot, alone, in this cold." The woman's face changed, went from worried to furious in the span of a heartbeat. The depot on Christmas Eve in 20 below. Her uncle left her there. Marcus Crawford. The same. The woman Martha Ellie remembered stepped forward and took Ellie's face in her hands. Her palms were warm and rough and gentle all at once. "Child, can you feel your fingers? Your toes?" I think so, ma'am. They're starting to hurt." "Good, that's good. Hurting means they're still alive." Martha ushered her inside. "Rafe, hot water and broth now." The warmth inside hit like a wall. Ellie's skin burned where the heat touched it, the dangerous kind of burning that meant real damage trying to heal. Martha worked fast, peeled off the frozen coat, unwrapped the snow-crusted mittens, checked fingers and toes with practiced efficiency. "Frostbite on 3 fingers, minor. The toes are worse, she's got old damage here, Jake. Scars from months ago that never healed proper." Uncle Marcus said doctors cost too much. Martha's jaw went tight. She kept working, wrapping Ellie's hands in warm cloths, not hot. "Hot'll do more damage than cold," she explained. "We warm you up slow." A Mexican man appeared with a steaming mug, steam rising with the smell of beef and onions. He was broad-shouldered and dark-eyed with a scar running down his left forearm. "This is Rafe Santos," Martha said. "Best foreman in Montana Territory. He's going to help get you warm." Rafe knelt beside the chair where Martha had settled Ellie, held the mug steady while she sipped. The heat hurt going down, but she didn't care. It was the first hot thing she'd had in 3 days. "Pequeña," Rafe said softly. "You are safe now. Nobody hurt you here." Ellie looked up at him, at Martha, at Jacob, who stood by the door with snow still melting off his coat and something fierce burning in his eyes. "I believe you," she whispered. And for the first time in 8 months, she actually did. They gave her a room upstairs, small but warm, with a real bed and clean quilts and a window that looked out over the snow-covered ranch. Martha brought her a nightgown that smelled like lavender and helped her change out of her frozen clothes. "These'll need mending," Martha said, examining the thin dress Ellie had been wearing. "Or burning. Probably burning. We'll get you proper clothes tomorrow." "I don't have money for clothes, ma'am." "Who said anything about money?" Martha smoothed the quilts over Ellie's legs. "You're family now, child. Family doesn't pay for clothes." Ellie felt her throat tighten. "I'm not family. I'm just—" "You're Thomas Crawford's daughter. Your daddy built this ranch alongside my brother. They were partners in all things." Martha sat on the edge of the bed, her sharp face softening. "Jake's been looking for you ever since he heard Thomas died. But your uncle wouldn't let anyone near you. Wouldn't answer letters. Wouldn't open the door when Jake rode out to check on you. Uncle Marcus said Mr. Hollister was dead. Said I didn't have anyone left in the world except him." Martha made a sound that was definitely a curse, even if Ellie didn't recognize the word. "That lying, scheming no good—" She stopped, took a breath. "Never mind. What matters is you're here now. You're safe. And in the morning, Jake's going to figure out how to make this legal and proper." Legal. Guardianship, child. Making sure you never have to go back to that man again. Ellie's hands found the pocket watch under her nightgown. She'd refused to take it off even when Martha helped her change. "Uncle Marcus will fight. He wants Papa's money. The trust fund." Martha's eyes went sharp. "You know about the trust fund." $18,000. I heard Uncle Marcus telling Mr. Drummond about it. He said he could get the money if— She couldn't finish the sentence. "If what, child?" if I wasn't around anymore. The silence that followed was worse than the cold at the depot. Martha's face went white, then red, then settled into something hard as iron. You rest now. We'll talk more in the morning. She stood but paused at the door. Ellie, I want you to understand something. You're not alone anymore. Whatever your uncle tries, whatever he does, you've got people who will fight for you. Do you understand? Ellie nodded. Her eyes were already closing, exhaustion finally winning over fear. Yes, ma'am. I understand. She woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of voices downstairs, low and serious. She crept out of bed, feet still sore from the frostbite, and made her way to the top of the stairs. Jacob's voice carried up to her. He was angry, not shouting, but his words had edges like broken glass. He left her there to die, Martha, on Christmas Eve, in weather that killed 2 head of cattle in the south pasture. I know. She's 10 years old, 10, and she figured out why her uncle wanted her dead all on her own, because nobody bothered to tell her. Nobody protected her. She's smart. Smart won't save her if Marcus gets her back. A thump, Jacob's fist hitting a table. I'm going to Judge Kincaid first thing after Christmas. Getting emergency custody filed. Thomas named me in his will, specified it clear. I've got legal standing. And if Kincaid sides with Blood family, then I'll find another way. Rafe's voice joined in. Boss, there's something else. I was in town yesterday before the storm hit. Marcus Crawford was at the Silver Dollar drunk and talking loud. Talking about what? The girl. Saying he'd made arrangements. Saying she'd never be a problem again. A pause. He was celebrating boss. Buying rounds for the house. Spending money he doesn't have. The silence that followed was heavy. Ellie pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. Finally, Jacob spoke, voice flat and cold. How much does he owe Drummond? 800, interest running weekly. And the trust fund. 18,000, locked until the girl turns 18 unless her guardian accesses it for her care and education. So if he becomes her legal guardian, he can drain every cent, pay off Drummond, disappear. Over my dead body. Ellie heard a chair scrape back. Footsteps approaching the stairs. She didn't move, couldn't move, frozen in place, just like she'd been at the depot. Jacob appeared at the bottom of the staircase, looked up, saw her standing there in the borrowed nightgown, her father's watch clutched in both hands. Their eyes met. How much did you hear? He asked quietly. Everything. Her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it shake. Uncle Marcus is going to try to get me back, so he can take Papa's money. Jacob climbed the stairs slowly, stopped 2 steps below her, putting them eye to eye. Ellie, I want you to listen to me. Are you listening? Yes, sir. I made your daddy a promise. The day before the mine collapsed, we sat on this porch and talked about what would happen if things went wrong. He knew the mine was unstable. Knew the owners were cutting corners on safety. Jacob's voice went rough. He asked me to look after you if anything happened to him. I gave him my word. And you keep your word. Always. His hand found her shoulder, warm and steady. I failed to save your daddy's life. The mine collapsed while I was in Helena buying cattle. By the time I got back, it was too late. That guilt's going to stay with me forever. Ellie's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. But I'm not going to fail you. Jacob's jaw set hard. Your uncle wants to fight. Let him fight. He wants to drag this through the courts. Let him try. I've got land cattle money and 30 years of reputation in this territory. I've got doctors' reports showing he neglected you. I've got witnesses who saw him celebrating your death before it even happened. What if it's not enough? Jacob smiled. Not a happy smile, a dangerous one. Then we'll make it enough. Your daddy trusted me with the most important thing in his life. That's you, Ellie. And I will burn this whole territory down before I let Marcus Crawford take you back. Downstairs, Martha appeared at the base of the stairs. Breakfast is ready. Ellie, can you eat? Ellie looked at Jacob, at the fierce determination in his eyes, at the promise that lived there solid as stone. Yes, ma'am, she said. I think I can eat a lot. Jung. Christmas Day came quiet and cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world covered in white, beautiful, and deadly at the same time. Martha roasted a chicken. Rafe brought in a small tree he'd cut from the north ridge. The ranch hands came in from the bunkhouse one by one, stomping snow from their boots, bringing small gifts wrapped in brown paper. Ellie sat in the warm kitchen and watched them all. These strangers who'd opened their home to her without question, who looked at her like she mattered, who spoke to her like she was a person, not a problem to be solved. Nobody had given her Christmas presents in 2 years. The last time had been Papa the Christmas before the mine collapsed. He'd carved her a wooden horse from a piece of oak. She'd left it behind at Uncle Marcus's house, hidden under a loose floorboard where he couldn't find it. Now she sat surrounded by packages, too overwhelmed to move. Go on, child. Martha nudged her gently. They're for you. A new dress from Martha, deep blue wool, warm and soft. Riding gloves from Rafe. A hair ribbon from one of the ranch hands. A primer from Jacob, the kind used to teach children to read. Ellie stared at the primer, ran her fingers over the cover. I don't know how to read, she said quietly. I know. Jacob sat down across from her. Your uncle kept you that way on purpose. Easier to control someone who can't read contracts or trust documents or their own daddy's will. Ellie looked up. Will you teach me? Martha will. She's better at teaching than me, but I'll help with the numbers. Why? Why what? Why do you care? The words came out harder than she meant them to. 8 months of Uncle Marcus telling her she was worthless, she was stupid, she was a burden nobody wanted. You don't know me, not really. I'm just some orphan your partner left behind. The kitchen went quiet. All the ranch hands stopped what they were doing. Martha's hand found Ellie's shoulder. Jacob leaned forward. His eyes held hers, steady and sure. Let me tell you something about your daddy, Ellie Crawford. In 1864, during the war, I took a bullet in the leg at a place called Antietam. Yankees were overrunning our position. I couldn't walk, couldn't fight. Everyone else ran. He paused. The fire crackled in the stove. Your daddy didn't run. He threw me over his shoulder and carried me 2 miles through enemy fire. Took 3 bullets himself doing it. Doctor said he should have died. He didn't. Said he'd made a promise to get me home, and Thomas Crawford kept his promises. Ellie felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. I owe your daddy my life. More than that, I owe him everything I am. This ranch, this family, everything I've built in 30 years started because Thomas Crawford wouldn't leave a wounded man to die. Jacob reached across the table, took her small hands in his rough ones. You're not some orphan. You're his daughter. You're the best thing he ever made, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you get everything he wanted for you, everything he dreamed. Do you understand? Ellie nodded. Words wouldn't come. Her throat was too tight, her heart too full. Good. Jacob squeezed her hands. Now eat your breakfast. You've got years of good meals to catch up on. She ate until she couldn't eat anymore. Then Martha brought out pie, and somehow she found room for that too. New Year's Day came cold and clear, the kind of Montana morning where the sky hurt to look at and your breath froze before it left your lips. Ellie was in the kitchen with Martha practicing her letters. She'd learned 4, already E-L-I, and the hard one E again, but different. Martha explained it was the same letter, but it made different sounds sometimes. English is complicated, Martha said. But you're smart. You'll figure it out. That's when they heard the hoofbeats. More than one horse coming fast up the road. Martha's hand stilled on the table. Her face went sharp. Stay here. She walked to the window, looked out. Her jaw went tight. Jake. They're here. Jacob came in from the barn, Rafe behind him. Both men moved to the window, and Ellie saw Jacob's face go hard as stone. "It's Marcus," he said, "and he's brought Marshall Garrett with him." Ellie's stomach dropped. Her hands clenched on the primer knuckles going white. "Stay inside," Jacob said. He pulled on his coat, checked the pistol at his hip. "Rafe, stay with her. Martha, don't let anyone in that door without my say-so." He walked out to the porch. Martha held Ellie back from the window, but she could still see, could still hear. Her uncle sat his horse like a man who thought he owned the world, thin 40-some, with a face that smiled too much and meant none of it. The marshal beside him looked uncomfortable. Decent man caught in an ugly situation. "Marcus." Jacob's voice carried clear in the cold air. "Jacob." Her uncle's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Heard you picked up something that belongs to me. Come to collect my ward." "She's not going anywhere." "That's not your decision to make." Marcus pulled papers from his coat, waved them. "I'm her legal guardian, blood kin. The marshal here will confirm. Territorial statute says blood relations take precedence. You left her at the depot to freeze." "I did no such thing." Marcus's voice rose indignant, but Ellie could hear the lie underneath. She'd learned to hear his lies months ago. "I provided prepaid fare to a proper Christian orphanage. If the ticket master failed to honor it, that's his failing, not mine." "There was no prepaid fare. We have the ticket master's sworn statement." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, just for a moment. Then the smooth smile came back. "A misunderstanding. Easily cleared up in court." He leaned forward in his saddle. "The point is, Jacob, that girl is mine by law. You're keeping her against my will. That's kidnapping. She's staying here until a judge says otherwise. Then we'll see a judge." Marcus's smile widened, and Ellie felt cold all over again, colder than she'd been at the depot. "But I should warn you, Judge Kincaid and I have an understanding. He's a reasonable man who respects the law, and the law says bloodkin takes priority." Jacob stepped off the porch, moved closer to Marcus's horse. "I know about the trust fund, Marcus. I know about your debts to Drummond. I know exactly what you plan to do with that girl's inheritance." For just a moment the smile slipped. Ellie saw fear flash across her uncle's face. Real fear, the kind he'd always tried to hide. Then it was gone, smoothed over like snow-covering tracks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And so will the judge when I present my evidence." Marcus stared at Jacob for a long moment. The two men faced each other across the frozen yard, one fighting for money, the other for a promise. Finally, Marcus shrugged, turned his horse. "Keep her warm for me, Jacob. But understand this, that girl is mine by law. You might have saved her from the cold, but you won't save her from the courts." He rode away. The marshal followed with a backward glance that might have been apologetic. Rafe spat into the snow after they were gone. "That man's got a black soul." "Doesn't matter." Jacob came back inside his face tight. "What matters is the law, and we need to understand exactly what we're up against." He looked at Ellie. She stood in the kitchen doorway, the primer still clutched in her hands, her face pale, but her eyes steady. "Ellie," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me everything you know about your uncle's debts, everything you heard him say about the trust fund. Can you do that?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. I can tell you everything." And she did. Ellie talked for 2 hours straight. Every conversation she'd overheard, every late-night visitor, every time Uncle Marcus had counted coins at the kitchen table with shaking hands and cursed her father's name. Jacob wrote it all down. Martha sat beside Ellie holding her hand when the memories got hard. Rafe stood by the window watching the road, making sure Marcus didn't come back with more men. "The scary man with the gold rings," Ellie said. "Mr. Drummond. He came to the house 3 times, always after dark. Always when Uncle Marcus thought I was sleeping. What did they talk about? Money. Always money. Ellie's voice was steady, but her hands trembled in Martha's grip. Uncle Marcus owed him $800. Mr. Drummond said the interest was running. Said Uncle Marcus had until February to pay, or he'd take it out of his hide. Jacob's pen stopped moving. February. Yes, sir. I remember because Mr. Drummond said something about how it would be a cold month to be buried in. Martha made a sound low in her throat. Jacob's jaw tightened. What else? The last time Mr. Drummond came, Uncle Marcus told him about Papa's trust fund. Said there was $18,000 sitting in a bank in Helena just waiting. Said all he needed was legal control of me, and he could access it for my care and education. And Drummond believed him? He laughed. Said Uncle Marcus, better figure out how to get that control fast, because February was coming, whether he had the money or not. Ellie paused. That was 2 weeks before Uncle Marcus brought me to the depot. The kitchen went quiet. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, the weight of what Ellie had just said pressed down on all of them. He planned this, Martha said. Her voice was tight with fury. He planned to let her freeze, then claim the trust fund as her grieving uncle. Can't claim a trust fund for a dead child, Rafe pointed out. No, but you can claim it for a missing one. Jacob set down his pen. Think about it. The depot's 20 miles from town. Storm like the one we had, a body could be buried under snow for months. By the time anyone found her, Marcus could have filed for emergency guardianship based on abandonment. Claimed she ran away. Claimed he'd been searching for her. The ticket master would have talked. The ticket master left a child alone in 20 below weather and didn't tell anyone. Jacob's voice was cold. You think a man like that is going to contradict whatever story pays him best? Ellie felt sick. She'd known Uncle Marcus was bad. She hadn't understood just how bad until now. So what do we do? Martha asked. We build a case. Jacob gathered his notes. Doc Garrett's coming this afternoon to examine Ellie properly. Every scar, every sign of neglect, everything Marcus did or didn't do for 8 months, we document it all. And then? Then we find out exactly what Judge Kincaid owes Marcus Crawford. Because a man doesn't talk about having an understanding with a territorial judge unless he's got something to hold over him. 2 weeks passed. The winter deepened, then started its slow retreat. Ice on the water trough thinned from 4 inches to 2. The sun stayed up past 5 o'clock. Ellie spent 2 hours every morning with Martha and the primer, tracing letters until her fingers cramped. E-L-L-I-E. Simple words that opened like doors. Cat, dog, son, horse. Each one a small victory over the uncle who'd kept her ignorant. Your papa would be proud, Martha said one morning, watching Ellie sound out a full sentence for the first time. The cat sat on the mat. Ellie looked up grinning. I read it. I actually read it. You did, and tomorrow we'll try something harder. In the afternoons, Rafe taught her ranch work. How to curry the horses, how to muck stalls without gagging, how to carry water buckets without slopping. He taught her Spanish counting to uno, dos, tres, said it would come in handy someday. You learn fast, pequeña, he told her. Faster than most of the hands I've trained. Uncle Marcus said I was slow. Your uncle is a pendejo. Rafe caught himself, glanced around to make sure Martha hadn't heard. Don't repeat that word. What does it mean? It means your uncle was wrong about you, about everything. And in the evenings after supper, Jacob taught her numbers, ledgers and accounts, the mathematics of running a ranch. Your papa and I built this place from nothing, he said, spreading the account books across the kitchen table. Started with 300 head of cattle and more hope than sense. Now we're running 2,400 head. That's worth about $43,000, give or take. Ellie stared at the columns. She couldn't read all the words yet, but she understood the numbers. Money in, money out. the careful tracking of every transaction. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to understand what you're worth. Jacob's voice was quiet but firm. Not the trust fund that's just money. I'm talking about you, your mind, your ability to learn, your daddy's daughter. Ellie traced a column of figures with her finger. Uncle Marcus never taught me anything. Your uncle wanted you helpless, easier to control, easier to steal from. Jacob closed the ledger. That's not going to happen here. By the time you're grown, you'll know more about business than half the men in Montana Territory. Promise. Promise. That night, Ellie practiced writing her name until the candle burned low. ELEANORCRAWFORD. 12 letters that proved she existed. That proved she mattered. She fell asleep with ink on her fingers and hope in her chest. Doc Garrett came on a Tuesday afternoon bringing his black bag and his careful eyes. He was a man in his 60s with a gray beard and spectacles that kept sliding down his nose. I need to examine you properly, he told Ellie. Check for any damage your uncle might have caused. Is that all right? Yes, sir. Martha stayed in the room while the doctor worked. He checked Ellie's eyes, her teeth the old scars on her hands and feet, measured her height and weight, asked questions about what she'd eaten at Uncle Marcus's house, how often she'd been sick, whether anyone had ever hit her. Ellie answered honestly. There was no point in lying, not anymore. When Doc Garrett finished, he had 3 pages of notes and a face like thunder. This is neglect, he said to Jacob, who'd been waiting in the kitchen. Medical neglect, nutritional neglect, educational neglect. Those frostbite scars on her toes, months old, never treated. She's at least 15 pounds underweight for her age. And these marks on her hands. She told us about the ruler, Martha said quietly. Repeated blows. Healed wrong because nobody bothered to set them properly. Doc Garrett's voice shook with controlled rage. In front of any judge in the territory, this carries weight. Enough weight to overcome blood relation. I don't know, but it's a start. Jacob took the medical report, read it through twice. Can you submit this as a formal affidavit? Already planned to. I'll have it notarized and filed with the court by end of week. Good. Jacob set the papers down. Because Marcus Crawford isn't going to stop. He's got Cornelius Blackwood as his attorney, now that snake from Helena who specializes in probate disputes. Blackwood? Doc Garrett grimaced. That man could argue water uphill. Which is why we need every piece of evidence we can get. Medical records, literacy assessments, financial documentation. We bury Marcus in paper. And if paper isn't enough, Jacob's jaw set hard. Then we find something else. The something else came 3 days later. Martha was unpacking Ellie's carpet bag, the small battered case Marcus had left at the depot. Most of it was empty. A spare dress 2 sizes too small. A hairbrush with half the bristles missing. A broken comb. And at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, a sealed envelope. Martha turned it over, read the return address. Her face went pale. Jake, you need to see this. Jacob took the envelope, broke the seal, pulled out the letter inside and started reading. He stopped, read it again. Sweet Jesus. What is it? Rafe moved closer. Jacob's hand was shaking. He read aloud, his voice flat with shock. Montana Territorial Bank, Helena. To whom it may concern. This letter confirms that the sum of $18,000 proceeds from the sale of the Silver Bell mining claim has been deposited in trust for Miss Eleanor May Crawford, daughter of Thomas Crawford, deceased. Said funds to be held until Miss Crawford reaches her 18th birthday to be administered by her legal guardian as necessary for her care and education. The kitchen went silent, except for the crackle of the stove. $18,000, Martha said, like a prayer or a curse. Marcus knows about this. Jacob looked at Ellie. Of course he knows. That's why he kept you. That's why he didn't send you to an orphanage when your papa died. and that's why he's fighting for guardianship now. Papa sold his mining claim. Ellie's voice came out small. He never told me. He sold it 2 weeks before the collapse. Got a good price, too better than most claims were going for. Jacob's jaw worked. He knew the mine was unstable, knew something bad was coming, so he sold out and put the money aside for you. And Uncle Marcus wants to steal it. Can't steal it. Not legally. But a guardian can withdraw funds for awards, care, and education. Room and board, medical expenses, clothing. Jacob's voice turned bitter. A guardian with gambling debts and no conscience could drain that trust fund dry in 6 months and call it all legitimate. Ellie felt the weight of all their eyes. $18,000. She couldn't picture that much money, couldn't imagine what it bought or what it meant. But she understood the look on their faces. She understood that Uncle Marcus had tried to kill her for it. "There's more," Martha said quietly. She was still holding the carpet bag, turning it over in her hands. "Feel this. The bottom's too thick." Jacob took the bag, ran his fingers along the seams, found a hidden pocket sewn into the lining so flat it was nearly invisible. Inside was another envelope, older, sealed with wax that bore her father's initials, TC. Jacob broke the seal with careful fingers, unfolded the letter inside, read it once, twice. His hands started shaking again. "What is it?" Martha asked. "It's from Thomas." Jacob's voice cracked. Written a week before he died. He read aloud each word, heavy with grief and wonder. "To whom it may concern. Should I die before my daughter Eleanor reaches adulthood, I hereby state my wishes regarding her guardianship. Jacob Hollister of Broken Creek Ranch is the man I trust with her life and her future. Not my brother Marcus. Never Marcus." Ellie felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Papa's voice. Papa's words. Papa's last gift hidden where Uncle Marcus would never think to look. Jacob kept reading. "Marcus Crawford has demonstrated moral weakness, financial irresponsibility, and a character unsuited to raising a child. He gambles, he drinks, and he views family as assets to be exploited rather than people to be cherished. Jacob Hollister was my partner in all things. He is honest, steady, and capable of providing the stable home my daughter deserves. I trust him, as I have trusted no other man." The kitchen was silent. Even Rafe, who never showed emotion, had tears in his eyes. "There's more," Jacob said. "At the bottom." He turned the paper over. "If questions arise about guardianship, William knows what kind of man Jacob is. He'll understand, and he knows what he owes me." "William," Martha said. "Judge William Kincaid. They served together in the war." Jacob's voice was rough. "Thomas never talked about it much, but I knew they'd fought at Antietam. Same unit. The judge owes your father something," Rafe said to Ellie. "Something big enough that Thomas thought it would matter." Ellie touched the letter. Her father's handwriting cramped and urgent. His last words to her, hidden in a carpet bag her uncle had been too lazy to search properly. "Papa planned for this," she whispered. "He knew Uncle Marcus might try something. He planned for you to protect me." Jacob folded the letter carefully, placed it in his breast pocket close to his heart. "And that's exactly what I'm going to do." The next morning, Jacob rode into town alone. He had business at the courthouse and at the Silver Dollar Saloon. The saloon was nearly empty at 10 in the morning. Just a few old men nursing whiskeys and a bartender polishing glasses that didn't need polishing. "Jacob Hollister." The bartender looked up. "Don't usually see you in here." "Don't usually have reason to be." Jacob took a seat at the bar. "I'm looking for information, Pete. About Marcus Crawford." Pete's face went careful, closed. "What kind of information?" "The kind that involves gambling debts and a man named Drummond." Silence stretched. Pete polished the same glass 3 times over. "That's dangerous territory, Jacob. Drummond doesn't like people asking questions." "Drummond doesn't like a lot of things. Neither do I." Jacob laid a $20 bill on the bar. Marcus Crawford tried to kill his niece, left her at the depot to freeze on Christmas Eve. She's 10 years old, Pete. 10. Something shifted in the bartender's face. Not much, just enough. Heard about that. Whole town's heard. Pete's voice dropped. Some folks think you're a hero for taking her in. Others think you're overstepping. I don't care what people think. I care about keeping that child safe. Jacob pushed the bill forward. What do you know about Marcus's debts? Pete glanced around the empty saloon. Then he reached under the bar and pulled out a leather book, the kind used to track gambling markers. He owes Drummond $840, interest running at 10% weekly. Pete flipped to a marked page. He's been trying to borrow against the girl's trust fund. Came in here 2 weeks ago with papers wanting me to witness a loan request. Did you sign? Hell no. Pete's face twisted with disgust. Told him to get out of my establishment and not come back until he learned the difference between a child and a bank account. What did he do? Got mean, said I'd regret it. Said when he got guardianship of the girl he'd remember who his friends were and who wasn't. Pete closed the book. Then he went to see Judge Kincaid. Jacob's stomach dropped. He went to the judge. Day before Christmas Eve, I saw him coming out of the courthouse grinning like a cat with cream. Pete leaned closer. Whatever he's got on Kincaid, it's enough to make him confident. Too confident for a man in his position. You know what it is? No, but I know someone who might. Pete wrote something on a scrap of paper. Sarah Bennett runs the general store since her husband passed. She and Judge Kincaid's wife are thick as thieves. If there's dirt on the judge, Sarah would know. Jacob took the paper. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep that little girl safe. Pete's eyes were hard. What Marcus Crawford did, that ain't something a decent man forgets. The general store smelled like coffee beans and lamp oil. A woman in her late 40s stood behind the counter, gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, hands strong from work. She looked up when Jacob walked in. Her face registered recognition, then something more complicated. Jacob Hollister. Been a while. Sarah. He tipped his hat. I need to talk to you. It's important. I figured. She came around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. Whole town's talking about you and the Crawford girl. Some say you're a saint. Others say you're a fool. What do you say? Sarah studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were brown and warm and sharp all at once. I say a man who rides through a blizzard to save a child he's never met is either the best kind of person or the craziest. Maybe both. Maybe. Jacob glanced around the store, empty except for them. I need information about Judge Kincaid, about whatever Marcus Crawford has on him. Sarah's face went still. That's a dangerous question. So I've been told. But that little girl's life is at stake, Sarah. Her uncle tried to kill her for money. He's going to try to get her back through the courts, and if he's got the judge in his pocket. He doesn't. Sarah cut him off. Not the way you think. Then how? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. Come to the back. This isn't a conversation for the sales floor. The back room was cluttered with inventory and smelled like dried herbs. Sarah poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot on the stove and handed one to Jacob. What do you know about Judge Kincaid's son? She asked. Didn't know he had one. He doesn't, not anymore. Sarah's voice was quiet. William Jr. died at Antietam. Same battle that killed half the men from this territory. He was 18 years old. Jacob felt something cold settle in his stomach. Thomas was at Antietam. I know. So was Marcus Crawford. Sarah met his eyes. Marcus likes to tell people he was a war hero. Says he saved Judge Kincaid's son during the battle, carried him to safety under enemy fire. Did he? No. Sarah's voice was flat. Thomas Crawford saved William Jr., carried him 3 miles with a bullet wound in his own shoulder. But William Jr. died anyway 3 days later from infection. And Marcus is claiming credit for what Thomas did. He's been claiming it for 20 years. Judge Kincaid never knew the truth. Thomas wouldn't talk about the war, wouldn't correct the lie. Said it didn't matter who got credit, just mattered that he tried. Jacob set down his coffee cup. His hands were shaking. So Marcus has been using a dead man's heroism to leverage a grieving father. For 2 decades, every time he needs a favor, he reminds the judge of how he tried to save his son. Sarah's face was hard. It's the cruelest kind of manipulation, and the judge has no idea he's been lied to. But if we could prove it. How Thomas is dead. The only other witnesses are either dead or scattered to the winds. Sarah shook her head. Marcus has been telling this story so long, half the territory believes it. Jacob reached into his coat, pulled out Thomas's letter. Thomas wrote this a week before he died. He mentions William Kincaid by name. Says the judge knows what he owes him. Sarah took the letter, read it slowly. Her eyes widened. Thomas knew, she said softly. He knew Marcus was lying about Antietam. He knew, and he never said anything. He was protecting the judge, protecting the memory of a dead boy. Jacob took the letter back. But he left me this. Left me the truth in case I ever needed it. You're going to tell the judge. I'm going to show him. Let him read Thomas's own words. Jacob's jaw set hard. That man has been manipulated by a liar for 20 years. He deserves to know the truth. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Be careful, Jacob. Marcus Crawford is desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things. I know. Jacob stood. Thank you for the information, Sarah. I won't forget it. Just keep that little girl safe. Sarah walked him to the door. She deserves better than what life's given her so far. She'll get it. I promise. Jacob rode back to the ranch with Thomas's letter burning a hole in his pocket. The sun was setting by the time he reached the house, painting the snow gold and purple. Ellie was waiting on the porch. She'd been watching for him, he realized. Watching the road like she expected him to disappear the way everyone else in her life had disappeared. You came back, she said. Not a question. A statement of wonder. Always will. He dismounted, handed the reins to Rafe. Come inside. We need to talk. Martha had supper waiting, roast beef and potatoes and fresh bread. They ate in silence, the adults exchanging looks over Ellie's head. Finally, Jacob pushed his plate back. I found out what Marcus has on Judge Kincaid. He told them everything. About Antietam. About the judge's dead son. About Marcus's 20-year lie. When he finished, Martha's face was white with rage. That's monstrous! Using a dead child to manipulate a grieving father. It's exactly the kind of thing Marcus would do. Jacob looked at Ellie. Your papa never corrected the lie because he didn't want to hurt Judge Kincaid. Didn't want to take away the comfort of believing his son died with a hero by his side. But Uncle Marcus isn't a hero, Ellie said. He's a coward. Yes, and now we can prove it. Jacob pulled out the letter. Your papa's words in his own hand. He wrote that the judge knows what he owes him. That's not language you use about a lie, that's language you use about the truth. So what do we do? Rafe asked. We take this to Judge Kincaid, show him the letter, tell him the truth about Antietam. Jacob's voice was steady. And then we let him decide what kind of man he wants to be. Martha shook her head slowly. It's a risk, Jake. If the judge doesn't believe us, if he takes Marcus's side, then we're no worse off than we are now. But if he does believe us... Jacob looked at Ellie. If he sees the truth, sees what Marcus really is, we might just have a chance. Ellie was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took Jacob's hand. Papa trusted you, she said. He trusted you to protect me, to tell the truth when it mattered. I know. Then do it. Her voice was small but steady. Tell the judge the truth. Whatever happens, it's better than living with lies." Jacob squeezed her hand. "That's exactly what your papa would have said." 2 days later, Jacob Hollister rode to the courthouse to tell Judge William Kincaid that everything he believed about his son's death was a lie, and everything in Silver Creek was about to change. Judge William Kincaid's office smelled like pipe tobacco and old leather. The man himself sat behind a desk piled with legal documents, his weathered face giving nothing away. He was 65 years old, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by much of anything. Jacob Hollister. The judge didn't stand. "I've been expecting you." "Have you?" "Marcus Crawford told me you'd come. Said you'd try to poison me against him with lies and slander." Kincaid's voice was flat. "Said you'd do anything to keep his niece from her rightful guardian." Jacob removed his hat, held it in both hands like a man at a funeral. "May I sit, Your Honor?" "You may." Jacob took the chair across from the desk. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The clock on the wall ticked away seconds that felt like hours. "I'm not here to lie to you," Jacob said finally. "I'm here to tell you a truth that should have been told 20 years ago." "About what?" "About your son." Something flickered in Kincaid's eyes. Pain old and deep that never quite went away. "My son is dead, Mr. Hollister. Has been for 22 years. What could you possibly have to say about him?" Jacob reached into his coat, pulled out Thomas Crawford's letter, laid it on the desk between them. "This was written by my partner, Thomas Crawford, Ellie's father. He wrote it a week before he died, hid it in his daughter's carpet bag where Marcus would never think to look." Kincaid didn't touch the letter. "What does it say?" "It says Thomas trusted me to raise his daughter. Says Marcus Crawford is morally unfit, financially irresponsible, a danger to any child in his care." Jacob paused. "And it mentions you by name." Now the judge's face changed. Not much, just enough to show he was listening. "Read it," Jacob said. "Please." Kincaid picked up the letter with hands that weren't quite steady, read it once, twice. His face went pale. "He says I know what I owe him." The judge's voice was rough. "What does that mean?" "It means Thomas Crawford saved your son's life at Antietam, carried him 3 miles under enemy fire with a bullet in his own shoulder." Jacob's voice was quiet but firm. "Not Marcus. Thomas." The silence that followed was absolute. Kincaid stared at Jacob like he was speaking a foreign language. "That's not possible. Marcus Crawford." "Marcus Crawford is a liar. He's been lying to you for 22 years, using your grief to manipulate you into doing his bidding." "No." Kincaid shook his head. "Marcus told me himself. Told me how he carried William to the field hospital, how he stayed with him until the end. Marcus was nowhere near your son that day. He was 3 miles behind the lines hiding in a supply wagon while better men died." Kincaid stood so fast his chair crashed backward. "You're lying. You have to be lying." "I'm telling you what Thomas told me years ago when the whiskey loosened his tongue and the memories got too heavy to carry alone." Jacob stayed seated, kept his voice calm. "Thomas didn't correct Marcus's lie because he didn't want to hurt you, didn't want to take away whatever comfort you found in believing your son died with a hero by his side. But Thomas was the hero. Thomas never thought of himself that way. He just thought he was doing what any decent man would do." Jacob pointed to the letter. "Look at his words. He writes that you know what you owe him. That's not language a man uses about someone else's heroism. That's language a man uses about his own." Kincaid sank back into his chair. His face had gone gray. 22 years, he whispered. "I've owed Marcus Crawford favors for 22 years, looked the other way when he gambled, reduced his sentences when he got into trouble, all because I thought he tried to save my boy. And now he's trying to use that influence to steal his niece's inheritance. The trust fund. $18,000, Everything Thomas saved for his daughter's future. Jacob leaned forward. Marcus left that child at a train depot on Christmas Eve in 20 below weather with 14 cents and a lie about prepaid fare. He was celebrating at the Silver Dollar before the night was out, buying rounds for the house, telling anyone who'd listen that his problems would soon be over. Kincaid's hands clenched into fists. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know what he was planning. I believe you, but now you do know, and you have to decide what you're going to do about it. For a long moment the judge just stared at Thomas's letter. His eyes traced the handwriting over and over, like he was looking for something that would make it all make sense. William talked about a man named Crawford, he said finally. In his letters home. Said there was a Crawford who'd carried him when he couldn't walk, who'd bandaged his wounds and kept him breathing long enough to reach the surgeons. Thomas Crawford, not Marcus. I never thought to ask which Crawford. Kincaid's voice broke. There were 3 Crawford brothers in that unit. Thomas, Marcus, and a younger one who died at Fredericksburg. When Marcus came to me after the war talking about how he'd tried to save my boy, I just assumed, you assumed because that's what he wanted you to assume. The judge was silent. Outside the window, Jacob could hear the sounds of town horses, wagons, people going about their business. None of them knew that inside this room a 22-year lie was finally crumbling. The hearing is scheduled for March 15th, Kincaid said at last. Marcus's attorney has filed motions. Character witnesses. A petition to liquidate the trust fund immediately upon guardianship being granted. I know. I can't dismiss the case. Even with this letter, I can't just throw out a blood relative's claim without a proper hearing. I'm not asking you to dismiss anything. Jacob met the judge's eyes. I'm asking you to hear the truth. All of it. To look at the evidence and make a fair ruling based on what's best for that child, not what Marcus Crawford thinks you owe him. And if the evidence isn't enough, if the law says blood relation takes precedence, then I'll accept your ruling and find another way. Jacob stood. But I don't think it'll come to that. I think when you see what Marcus did to that girl, the neglect, the abuse, the deliberate isolation, you'll understand exactly what kind of man he really is. Kincaid was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up Thomas's letter and read it one more time. Thomas Crawford was a better man than I ever knew. He was the best man I ever knew? And his daughter? She's smart, brave, kind. Everything her father hoped she'd be. Jacob's voice softened. She's been at my ranch for 6 weeks now, Your Honor. In that time, she's learned to read, gained 15 pounds, and started laughing again. She has nightmares about freezing to death, but they're getting better. She's healing. And if I send her back to Marcus, then everything good that's happened to her will be destroyed. And within a year, that trust fund will be gone, spent on gambling debts and whiskey, and Ellie Crawford will be right back where she started alone, afraid and at the mercy of a man who sees her as nothing but a source of income. Kincaid folded the letter carefully, handed it back to Jacob. Keep this safe. You'll need it at the hearing. Does that mean? It means I'm going to do what I should have done 22 years ago. The judge's jaw set hard. I'm going to find out the truth, all of it. And then I'm going to make sure the right thing happens whatever the law says. Jacob put on his hat. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet. Marcus Crawford has Cornelius Blackwood in his corner. That man could argue water uphill and make you believe gravity was wrong. I know. And when Marcus finds out you've been to see me... Kincaid shook his head. Be careful, Jacob. He's desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. So I've been told. Jacob walked out of the courthouse with Thomas's letter safe in his pocket and something that felt almost like hope burning in his chest. It didn't last long. Marcus Crawford was waiting on the street. He wasn't alone. Silas Drummond stood beside him, a heavy man with a red face and gold rings on every finger. 2 more men flanked them, the kind of men who solved problems with their fists. Jacob. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Heard you were visiting our esteemed judge. Hope you weren't filling his head with lies about me. Only told him the truth, Marcus. Something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you. Marcus's smile tightened. You're making a mistake, Hollister. A big one. That girl belongs to me by law. Blood is blood. No amount of money or influence is going to change that. We'll see what the judge thinks. The judge thinks what I tell him to think. Marcus stepped closer. Or did you forget I saved his boy at Antietam? He owes me. Jacob felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. You might want to ask him about that. Something flickered in Marcus's face. Doubt. Fear. Gone almost before Jacob could register it. What did you tell him? The truth. About who really carried William Kincaid to that field hospital. About who really held that boy while he died. Jacob met Marcus's eyes. About who's been lying about it for 22 years. Marcus's face went white, then red, then a mottled purple that meant violence was coming. You son of a bitch! Careful, Marcus. There are witnesses. I don't care about witnesses. Marcus's voice rose. That girl is mine. That money is mine. And if you think some dead man's letter is going to change that, it already has. Drummond stepped forward. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it worse. Mr. Holloway, I don't think you understand the situation. Marcus here owes me a considerable sum of money. Money that's coming due very soon. If he doesn't pay... Drummond spread his hands. Well, let's just say I'm not a patient man. That's between you and Marcus. It was. But now it's between you and me too. Drummond's smile was all teeth. See, I've got an investment in Marcus getting that guardianship. That trust fund is my collateral. If Marcus doesn't get the girl, he doesn't get the money. And if he doesn't get the money... He left the threat hanging. Jacob looked at the four men arrayed against him, calculated the odds, decided they weren't good. I'm not going to back down, he said quietly. Not for you, not for anyone. Then you're going to get hurt. Drummond nodded to his men. Not today, not here where people can see. But soon, and when it happens, is there a problem here? The voice came from behind Jacob. He turned to see Marshal Tom Garrett approaching, hand resting casually on his pistol. No problem, Marshal. Marcus's smile snapped back into place. Just having a friendly conversation with my neighbor. Didn't look friendly from where I was standing. A misunderstanding. Marcus tipped his hat. We were just leaving. He walked away, Drummond and his men following. But he looked back once, and the hatred in his eyes was pure poison. Thank you, Jacob said to the marshal. Don't thank me. Just watch your back. Garrett's face was grim. Silas Drummond isn't a man you want to cross. He's got connections all over the territory, judges, marshals, even a few territorial legislators. If he decides to make your life difficult, then I'll deal with it. You've got a child to think about now, Jacob. A child who needs you alive. I know. Jacob mounted his horse. Believe me, I know. The next Sunday was the first church service since Christmas. Martha insisted they all attend, said it was important for Ellie to be seen in public to show the town she was thriving. People talk, she said, brushing Ellie's hair until it shone. Let them see her healthy and happy. Let them see what real care looks like. Ellie wore her new blue dress, the one Martha had sewn from fabric Jacob brought from Helena. She looked almost like a different child, from the frozen waif he'd found at the depot, still thin, but with color in her cheeks and light in her eyes. The whispers started before they reached the church steps. That's the Crawford girl, living out at Holloway's place. A bachelor raising a child. It ain't proper. I heard he paid off the judge, bribed him to rule in his favor. Ellie's hand found Jacob's. He squeezed once steady and kept walking. Inside, Reverend Patterson was already at the pulpit. He paused when he saw them, something complicated passing across his face. Welcome, he said. All of God's children are welcome in his house. But the way he said it made it sound like a warning. They found seats in the back pew. Throughout the service, Jacob felt eyes on them, curious, hostile, pitying. Ellie sat straight and still, hands folded in her lap, face revealing nothing. She'd learned to do that, Jacob realized. Learned to hide what she was feeling, so it couldn't be used against her. After the service, the congregation spilled onto the steps for the ritual of gossip and greeting. Most people avoided Jacob and Ellie, but a few approached the rancher families, mostly who knew what hard work and honest living looked like. Then Margaret Henderson appeared. She was the banker's wife, a woman with a voice like a church bell and opinions about everything. She led a cluster of ladies who called themselves the Moral Improvement Society, which mostly meant they improved their morals by tearing down everyone else's. Mr. Holloway. Margaret positioned herself directly in their path. We haven't been properly introduced to your guest. This is Eleanor Crawford, Thomas Crawford's daughter. Yes, we'd heard. Margaret's eyes traveled over Ellie with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock. Poor dear, losing her father so young, then her uncle finding himself unable to care for her. Such a tragedy. Her uncle left her at a train depot to freeze. Martha's voice could have cut glass. That's not tragedy. That's attempted murder. The ladies around Margaret made shocked sounds, the kind that weren't actually shocked at all. That's a serious accusation. Margaret's smile never wavered. Marcus Crawford is a respected member of this community, a man of business, family to this child. A man who gambles away money he doesn't have and tried to steal from an orphan's trust fund. Jacob kept his voice level. But please do go on about respect. I'm simply concerned for propriety. Margaret leaned closer, dropping her voice to a stage whisper that carried perfectly. A young girl living with a bachelor. Even with your sister present, Mr. Holloway. Well, tongues will wag. Let them wag. Judge Kincaid is a godly man. He values Christian morality and proper family structure. You might want to consider that before this situation becomes permanent. She swept away her flock following. Ellie watched them go. Her face was still calm, but Jacob saw her hands trembling. Don't listen to them, he said quietly. They think you're bad. For helping me. They think a lot of things, most of them wrong. Ellie was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at him, and her eyes were far older than 10 years old. Uncle Marcus is going to use this, isn't he? What they're saying, he's going to tell the judge that you're not proper, that I shouldn't be with you. Probably. And what are you going to do? Tell the truth. Show the evidence. Let the judge decide. Jacob knelt to her level. Ellie, listen to me. Those women in there, they don't know you. They don't know what Marcus did to you. All they know is gossip and rumor. But the judge will see the truth, the doctor's reports, the literacy charts, the proof that you're thriving here in ways you never did with Marcus. What if it's not enough? Then we'll figure something else out. But I'm not going to let them take you. Not now. Not ever. Ellie threw her arms around his neck, held on tight. I believe you, she whispered. They stayed like that for a long moment, the girl who'd been left to freeze, and the man who'd promised to keep her warm. When Jacob finally stood, he saw Sarah Bennett watching from across the churchyard. She gave him a small nod. Then she turned and walked toward Margaret Henderson's group. Jacob couldn't hear what she said, but he saw the effect. Saw Margaret's face go pale. Saw the other women draw back. When Sarah returned, she was smiling. What did you say to them? Martha asked. Just reminded Margaret that her husband's bank holds the mortgage on the Henderson farm, and that certain rumors about Mr. Henderson's activities in Helena might be of interest to her. Sarah's smile widened. Amazing how quickly people lose interest in gossip when they remember they have secrets of their own. Jacob felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The hearing's still 2 weeks away and Cornelius Blackwood has been preparing something. Sarah's face went serious. I've heard rumors, Jacob. He's planning to call witnesses, character witnesses who'll say whatever Marcus pays them to say. We've got witnesses too. Doc Garrett, Pete from the saloon. The ticket master? The ticket master left town 3 days ago. Didn't tell anyone where he was going. Sarah's voice was grim. Rumor has it he got a sudden windfall, enough to start over somewhere nobody knows him. Jacob's stomach dropped. Marcus paid him off. Or Drummond did, same difference. Sarah touched his arm. Be careful, Jacob. These men don't play fair, and they have a lot more to lose than you do. That night, Jacob sat up late in his office going over everything one more time. The evidence, the witnesses, the arguments Blackwood might make, and how to counter them. Martha found him there past midnight. You should sleep. Can't. He rubbed his eyes. Keep thinking about what Sarah said, about Blackwood's witnesses, about all the ways this could go wrong. Martha sat down across from him. You're doing everything you can. Is it enough? I don't know, but that little girl upstairs believes in you. She's sleeping peacefully for the first time in months because she trusts you to keep her safe. What if I can't? Then we'll figure something else out. Together. Martha reached across the desk and took his hand. You're not alone in this, Jake. You've got me. Rafe, Doc Garrett, Sarah Bennett, half the ranchers in the territory who know what kind of man you are. And the other half who think I'm overstepping. They'll come around when they see the truth. Will they? Or will they believe whatever Blackwood tells them? Jacob's voice was bitter. A bachelor taking in a young girl. A blood relative being denied his rights. You know how these things play in court, Martha. You know how easy it is to twist the truth. Then we twist it back. Martha's grip tightened. Thomas Crawford trusted you with the most important thing in his life. He knew what kind of man you were. He knew you'd fight for her. And if I lose, then you'll appeal. And if that doesn't work, you'll find another way. Because that's who you are, Jacob Holloway. You don't give up. You never have. Jacob looked at his sister, this woman who'd given up her own dreams to come take care of him after Mary died, who'd never complained, never asked for anything, just worked and supported and believed. Thank you, he said, for everything. Don't thank me yet. We've still got 2 weeks of work ahead of us. Martha stood. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow we're going to find out exactly what Marcus Crawford has been doing with his brother's memory. And then we're going to make sure the whole territory knows the truth. The days that followed were a blur of preparation and worry. Doc Garrett submitted his medical affidavit. Jacob gathered character witnesses, ranchers who'd known Thomas merchants who'd watched Marcus descend into gambling and debt. Martha documented Ellie's progress reading level weight gain, the slow healing of scars, both visible and invisible. Ellie worked harder than any of them. Every morning she was up before dawn practicing her letters by candlelight. Every afternoon she helped with ranch chores, learning the work that would someday be partly hers. Every evening she sat with Jacob and Martha listening to them prepare for the hearing, asking questions, offering observations that were startlingly sharp for a 10-year-old. Uncle Marcus always talked louder when he was lying, she said one night, like he thought if he was loud enough people would believe him. That's a good thing to remember, Jacob said. And he never looked people in the eye, not really. He'd look at their foreheads or their ears so it seemed like he was looking at them, but he wasn't. Martha wrote it down, every detail, every observation. 4 days before the hearing, Marcus Crawford came to the ranch again. This time he came alone. No marshal, no attorney, just a desperate man on a tired horse, whiskey on his breath and fear in his eyes. Jacob met him at the gate. You've got no business here, Marcus. Just want to talk. Marcus's voice was hoarse. Man to man. No lawyers, no judges. Just us. Talk about what? A deal. Marcus dismounted, nearly falling. He was drunk, not falling down drunk, but drunk enough to be dangerous. I'll withdraw my petition. Sign over all parental rights. You can have her legal and proper. Raise her however you want." Jacob felt the same cold fury he'd felt before. In exchange for what? $3,000. Marcus's smile was sick. "Cash money. Sign the papers, give me the funds, and I'm gone. Out of Montana territory. You'll never hear from me again." "You're selling your niece." "I'm being practical." Marcus's voice rose. "She's better off with you. I can see that. But I've got debts, Jacob. Drummond's not patient. He's threatening things. Should have thought of that before you started gambling." I know I made mistakes." Marcus's eyes were wild. "But this way, everybody wins. Ellie gets a good home, you get legal custody, and I get to keep breathing." Jacob looked at the man in front of him, saw the fear, the desperation, the utter lack of shame. "No." Marcus blinked. "What?" "I said no." Jacob's voice was flat. "I'm not paying you a single cent for that child. I'm not rewarding you for trying to kill her. And I'm not letting you walk away without the whole territory knowing exactly what kind of man you are." "You self-righteous bastard." The fear in Marcus's eyes turned to hatred. "You think you're better than me? You think some dead man's letter is going to save you? I think the truth is going to save me. The truth you've been running from your whole life. Blackwood's going to tear you apart. He's going to make you look like a predator. Make that little girl look like a liar." Marcus's voice rose to a shout. "And when it's done, I'll have guardianship, and that trust fund, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it." "We'll see." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed an ugly sound with no humor in it. $3,000, Jacob, last chance. Get off my land. You'll regret this." Marcus mounted his horse. "March 15th, I'll see you in court." He rode away into the gathering darkness. Jacob stood at the gate for a long time after he was gone, watching the road, thinking about everything that could go wrong. Then he went inside to tell Ellie that her uncle had tried to sell her again, and that in 4 days they would finally find out what justice looked like in Montana territory. March 15th came cold and gray, the kind of morning that couldn't decide between winter and spring. Ellie woke before dawn, her stomach tight with fear she couldn't name. Martha helped her dress in her best clothes, the blue wool dress, a clean white pinafore, her hair brushed until it shone. She looked almost like a different girl from the frozen waif who'd clutched 14 cents on a depot bench 3 months ago. Almost. "Remember," Martha said, smoothing Ellie's collar, "whatever happens in there, you tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask of you." "What if the truth isn't enough?" Martha's hand stilled. "Then we'll figure something else out. But the truth is always enough, Ellie. Always. It just takes time for people to see it." The courthouse was packed when they arrived. Every bench filled people standing along the walls, the air thick with body heat and whispered speculation. Ellie had never seen so many people in one place. Ranchers and merchants, church ladies and saloon keepers, all of them staring at her like she was something to be studied. Jacob's hand found her shoulder. Steady. Warm. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "And remember, you're not alone." Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with Cornelius Blackwood beside him. He looked cleaner than he had at the ranch, sober, respectable, wearing a suit Ellie had never seen before. When his eyes found her, he smiled. It was the smile that scared her most, the one that never reached his eyes. "All rise." Judge Kincaid entered, his face carved from stone. He settled behind his bench and surveyed the courtroom with eyes that gave nothing away. "Be seated. Case number 47, Crawford versus Hollister. Petition for guardianship and trust fund administration." He paused, looking at both tables. "Mr. Blackwood, you filed this petition. Present your case." Blackwood stood. He was a thin man with oiled hair and a voice like silk over broken glass. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of territorial law. Marcus Crawford is the blood uncle of Eleanor May Crawford, orphaned by her father's tragic death 8 months ago. Under statute, blood relations of the first degree take precedence in guardianship matters. Mr. Hollister was named in the deceased's will, Kincaid said, a will that was never properly probated, Your Honor, and which contains guardianship language that conflicts with territorial statute. The law is clear: blood kin takes priority unless proven morally unfit. Then present your evidence of fitness. Blackwood called his first witness, a banker who testified that Marcus had steady employment and paid his bills on time. A minister who stated Marcus attended church regularly and contributed to the collection plate. 2 merchants who claimed Marcus was a man of good character, if occasionally challenged by financial circumstances. Ellie listened to them lie one after another and felt something cold settle in her chest. Then Blackwood called Marcus himself. Her uncle took the stand with his hat in his hands, playing the part of the grieving, overwhelmed relative. He testified about taking Ellie in after Thomas's death, about struggling to provide for her despite his limited means, about making the difficult decision to seek institutional care when he realized he couldn't give her the life she deserved. The depot incident, Blackwood prompted. Tell the court what happened. I arranged passage to St. Catherine's Orphanage in Helena. Marcus's voice was steady, practiced. A fine institution run by good Christian women. I prepaid the fare $3.50, left Eleanor at the depot with the ticket and clear instructions. Did you abandon her? Absolutely not. Marcus shook his head, the picture of wounded innocence. I ensured she had everything she needed. If the ticketmaster failed to honor the prepaid arrangement, that's his failing, not mine. I loved my brother. I would never harm his child. Ellie's hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to scream that he was lying, that there had been no prepaid fare, that he'd left her to freeze because she was worth more to him dead than alive. But she stayed silent. Jacob had told her to wait, to trust him. Blackwood continued. And Mr. Hollister's current guardianship. Do you have concerns? I do. Marcus's face arranged itself into worry. Jacob Hollister is a bachelor. He lives alone except for his sister, a woman of uncertain reputation who abandoned her own marriage. A young girl under their roof with no proper maternal figure, no Christian guidance. Objection. Jacob's voice cut through the courtroom. Martha Hollister's husband abandoned her, not the other way around, and her reputation is beyond reproach. Your Honor, Blackwood said smoothly, Mr. Hollister will have his chance to present witnesses. For now, I'm simply establishing my client's concerns. Kincaid's jaw tightened. Continue. But keep to facts, Mr. Blackwood. Of course, Your Honor. Blackwood turned back to Marcus. Is there anything else you'd like the court to know about the current arrangement? Just that I'm worried for my niece. Marcus's voice trembled artfully, perfectly. She's been isolated on a remote ranch, kept away from her family, her community, her faith. Whatever Mr. Hollister's intentions, a bachelor household is no place to raise a young girl. People talk, Your Honor. And what they're saying... He let it hang in the air like poison. Blackwood yielded the witness. Judge Kincaid looked at Jacob. Cross-examination. Jacob stood slowly. He'd been quiet throughout Blackwood's presentation, taking notes, his face revealing nothing. But Ellie could see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled fury beneath the calm. Mr. Crawford, you testified you paid $3.50 for your niece's train fare. That's correct. We have a sworn affidavit from the ticketmaster stating no such payment was received. Marcus didn't flinch. Then he pocketed the money. That's theft, not abandonment on my part. And you left her with $1.14 for incidentals. A reasonable sum for a short journey. In 20 below weather, on Christmas Eve. Jacob's voice stayed level. How long did you expect her to survive if no train came? The ticketmaster should have... Answer the question. How long? Marcus's jaw tightened. I expected the arrangements I made to be honored. You gamble, Mr. Crawford. Blackwood shot up. Objection. Relevance. It goes to character, Your Honor, and to motive. Kincaid nodded slowly. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Crawford. I occasionally play cards. Yes, for small stakes. Jacob pulled out the gambling markers he'd collected. These show $840 owed to Silas Drummond with interest running at 10% weekly. That's not small stakes. The courtroom murmured. Marcus's face went pale. Those are private debts. These debts came due in February, right after you left your niece at the depot. Jacob laid out the timeline with brutal precision. And you filed a petition to liquidate her trust fund. $18,000 left by her father. You needed money. She had money. Convenient. That's a slanderous accusation. It's documented fact. Jacob handed the papers to the judge. The petition itself filed January 2nd, requesting immediate access to trust funds for accumulated expenses. Kincaid read it, his face darkening. You kept her illiterate, didn't you? Jacob's voice was quiet now, which made it more dangerous. 11 years old, and she couldn't read her own name when she came to me. She's slow. She's reading at third grade level now, after 12 weeks. Jacob laid Martha's literacy charts on the judge's bench. Dr. Garrett's reports show she was deliberately malnourished and neglected under your care. And Rafe Santos has testimony from the Silver Dollar Saloon that you attempted to borrow against the trust fund using your niece as collateral for your gambling debts. The courtroom erupted. Kincaid's gavel came down hard. Order. I will have order. When quiet returned, Blackwood was on his feet, his smooth composure cracked. Your Honor, this is character assassination. My client's financial struggles don't negate his blood relationship or his legal rights under territorial statute. They speak to moral fitness, Kincaid said coldly, which is the statutory exception. Continue, Mr. Hollister. Jacob called his witnesses. Doc Garrett testified about the neglect, the malnutrition, the untreated frostbite scars, the signs of repeated physical abuse. Martha presented her literacy charts showing Ellie's dramatic improvement in 12 weeks. Rafe showed the gambling records and the testimony from the saloon. Then Jacob presented the cattle ledgers. 2,400 head at $18 average value. $43,000 in documented equity. This proves financial stability, he said. Proves I can provide for Ellie in ways Marcus Crawford never could. Finally, he pulled out Thomas's letter. This was hidden in Thomas Crawford's pocket watch, he said. Written 1 week before he died. It names his wishes for his daughter's guardianship. Blackwood objected. Unwitnessed, legally inadmissible. I'll decide what's admissible. Kincaid took the letter. The courtroom held its breath as he read. His face changed. Something passed over it, grief and rage and dawning understanding all tangled together. When he looked up, his eyes found Marcus. You knew about this letter. I know, Your Honor. I had no idea. Your brother explicitly stated you were unfit, that Jacob Hollister was the man he trusted. Kincaid's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. He mentions me by name, says I would understand, says I know what I owe him. The silence was absolute. Your Honor, Jacob said carefully, I believe Thomas Crawford saved your son's life at Antietam during the war. Kincaid removed his spectacles, cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. Someone carried my boy 3 miles under enemy fire, got him to the field hospital, stayed with him until he died. He looked at Marcus. For 22 years, I believe that man was you. Marcus's face went white. Your Honor. Was it you, Marcus? The battle was chaos. There were so many. Was it you? The question hung in the air like a blade. Marcus's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. I served with both Crawford brothers, a voice said from the gallery. An old man stood up, grizzled, one-armed, wearing the faded blue of a Union veteran. Henry Dawson, Your Honor. Corporal 3rd Montana Volunteers. I was at Antietam. Kincaid's gavel came down. This is not— Let him speak, someone shouted. Others joined in. Let him speak. The judge hesitated. Then he nodded slowly. Thomas Crawford carried your boy, Dawson said. I saw it myself. Saw him take 3 bullets doing it. Saw Marcus Crawford hiding behind a supply wagon half a mile away crying for his mama. The old man's voice dripped contempt. Thomas never corrected the lie because he didn't want to hurt you, Judge. But some of us knew. Some of us always knew. The courtroom exploded. Kincaid's gavel crashed down again and again. Order, order. It took 5 minutes to restore quiet. When it finally came, Marcus Crawford sat slumped at the plaintiff's table, his face the color of ash. Mr. Blackwood, Kincaid said, do you have any evidence that contradicts these facts? Any evidence at all that your client is fit to raise this child? Blackwood's smooth confidence was gone. He looked at Marcus, at the hostile courtroom, at the judge whose eyes held 22 years of betrayed trust. Your Honor, the statute is clear. Blood relations take precedence. The statute allows for exceptions when blood relations prove morally unfit. Kincaid's voice was ice. I'm prepared to rule that Marcus Crawford meets that standard 10 times over. He looked at Ellie. Young lady approached the bench. Ellie's heart stopped. She looked at Jacob, who nodded once encouragingly. Then she stood on shaking legs and walked forward alone. The distance from her seat to the judge's bench felt like miles. Every eye in the courtroom followed her. She could feel Marcus's hatred on her back like heat from a fire. But she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, the way Jacob had taught her. Miss Crawford. Kincaid's voice softened when he spoke to her. Can you read? Yes, sir. He handed her the trust fund document. Read this for me. Ellie took the paper. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. Montana Territorial Bank Helena. To whom it may concern. This letter confirms that the sum of $18,000 proceeds from the sale of the Silver Bell mining claim has been deposited in trust for Miss Eleanor May Crawford, daughter of Thomas Crawford deceased. Said funds to be held until Miss Crawford reaches her 18th birthday to be administered by her legal guardian as necessary for her care and education. Perfect. Every word clear. Not a single stumble. Kincaid's face softened further. Who taught you to read? Miss Martha Hollister, sir. Mr. Jacob helped with the numbers. And do you understand what that document means? Yes, sir. It's the money Papa left me, for when I'm grown. Do you want to go back to your Uncle Marcus? Ellie looked at Marcus. At the man who had starved her and beaten her and left her to freeze. At the uncle who had tried to sell her twice, once to death, once to Jacob. No, sir. Her voice didn't waver. I want to stay with Mr. Jacob. He kept his promise to Papa. He kept me safe. Kincaid nodded slowly. Return to your seat. Ellie walked back to Jacob, her legs shaking with relief. His arm came around her shoulders, warm and strong. The judge picked up his gavel. I've heard enough. The courtroom went silent. Guardianship of Eleanor May Crawford is awarded to Jacob Hollister with all legal rights and responsibilities pertaining thereto. The trust fund shall remain intact, locked in territorial bank custody under Mr. Hollister's stewardship until Miss Crawford reaches her 18th birthday. The gavel came down like thunder. Furthermore, Marcus Crawford is ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1,500 for attempted fraud and child endangerment. He is hereby enjoined from any contact with the minor child. This guardianship is permanent and final. Marcus surged to his feet. This isn't legal. You can't. I can. And I have. Kincaid's voice cracked like a whip. Marshal, escort Mr. Crawford from my courtroom. And Marcus stopped, his face twisted with fury. If I ever see you within 100 miles of that child, I will personally ensure you spend the rest of your life in a territorial prison. Do you understand me? You're making a mistake, Marcus snarled. Drummond won't let this stand. He's got investments in this. Then Mr. Drummond can take it up with me. Now get out of my courtroom before I have you arrested for contempt. The marshal grabbed Marcus by the arm. He fought for a moment, struggling against the grip, his eyes wild. This isn't over, Hollister, he screamed as they dragged him toward the door. You hear me? This isn't over. Then he was gone and the courtroom exploded. People surged forward, ranchers slapping Jacob on the back, women pressing Martha's hands, children staring at Ellie with curious eyes. The noise was overwhelming, joyful, triumphant. But Ellie barely heard any of it. She threw herself into Jacob's arms and held on tight, sobbing, shaking, finally letting go of the fear she'd carried for 8 months. It's over, Jacob murmured into her hair. It's over, Ellie. You're safe now. You're home. He can't take me back. Never. I promise. Never. She cried harder. Not sad tears, relieved ones. The kind that washed away everything bad and left room for something new to grow. When she finally pulled back, Judge Kincaid was standing beside them. His stern face had softened into something almost gentle. Miss Crawford? Ellie wiped her eyes. Yes, sir. Your father was a hero, a real one. Not like the man who's been stealing his glory for 20 years. Kincaid's voice was rough with emotion. I owe Thomas Crawford more than I can ever repay. But I can start by making sure his daughter gets the life she deserves. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thank the man who rode through a blizzard to save you. Kincaid looked at Jacob. I misjudged you, Mr. Hollister. Listened to gossip when I should have been looking at facts. I won't make that mistake again. No need to apologize, Your Honor. You did the right thing today. That's what matters. Kincaid nodded slowly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a medal on a faded ribbon. This belonged to my son, William Jr. He wore it the day Thomas carried him off that battlefield. He pressed it into Ellie's hands. I want you to have it, so you'll always remember what real courage looks like. Ellie stared at the medal. It was tarnished with age, the inscription worn almost smooth, but she could still make out the words, for valor. I'll keep it safe, she whispered. I promise. I know you will. Kincaid straightened. You're Thomas Crawford's daughter. You know what promises mean. He walked away, and Ellie watched him go. This man who had believed a lie for 22 years, and finally found the courage to see the truth. Outside the courthouse, the celebration continued. Sarah Bennett had set up refreshments on the sidewalk. Rafe was telling anyone who would listen about how Ellie had learned to curry horses and count in Spanish. Martha was crying and laughing at the same time. Ellie stood in the middle of it all. Jacob's hand on her shoulder and felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Safe. Loved. Home. Mr. Jacob. Yeah. What happens now? Jacob looked down at her, and his weathered face broke into a smile. Now we go home. We have supper. We feed the horses. He squeezed her shoulder. And tomorrow we start building the rest of your life. Together. Together. Always. Ellie leaned against him, watching the townsfolk celebrate her freedom. Somewhere out there, Uncle Marcus was running from his debts and his shame. Somewhere Silas Drummond was counting his losses. Somewhere the lies and cruelty of the past were finally being buried. But here in the cold March sunshine, surrounded by people who had fought for her, Ellie Crawford finally understood what her father had tried to tell her all along. Family wasn't blood. Family was who showed up when you needed them, who fought for you when you couldn't fight for yourself, who kept their promises even when it cost them everything. Jacob Hollister had ridden through a blizzard to save a child he'd never met because her father had once saved him. Now it was Ellie's turn to carry that promise forward. She didn't know yet what shape her life would take, didn't know what she would build or who she would become. But she knew one thing for certain. She would never forget what real courage looked like, and she would spend the rest of her life trying to be worthy of it. 3 weeks after the hearing, the first real warmth came to Montana Territory. The kind of April morning where you could smell the earth waking up, where meadowlarks sang from fence posts and the creek ran full with snowmelt. Ellie woke to sunshine streaming through her window and the smell of bacon drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, she lay still, letting the warmth soak into her bones. This was real. This was home. Nobody was going to take it away. She dressed quickly and ran downstairs, her feet bare on the wooden floors. Martha was at the stove, flipping pancakes. Jacob sat at the table with his coffee, the newspaper spread before him. "Mornin', sleepyhead," Martha said. "Thought you were going to sleep through breakfast." "I was dreaming." Ellie slid into her chair. "Good dreams this time." Jacob looked up from his paper. His eyes were warm. No nightmares. Not for a week now. That's good. That's real good. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from people who didn't need words to fill every space. Ellie had learned to love these quiet mornings. The peace of them. The safety. After breakfast, Rafe appeared at the kitchen door. "Boss, we're bringing in the spring calves for branding. You want Ellie to help?" Jacob looked at her. "You up for it?" Ellie's heart jumped. She'd been watching the ranch work for weeks, learning the rhythms of cattle and horses and land, but she'd never been asked to participate. Not really. "Yes, sir, I'm ready." "Then let's go." The branding pen was chaos and dust, and the bawling of calves separated from their mothers. Ellie stood at the fence watching the hands work, roping, wrestling, pressing the hot iron to hide. "That one." Rafe pointed to a rust-colored calf, strong and healthy. "Good first one for her to mark." Jacob handed her the leather gloves. They were too big, but she pulled them on anyway. "You sure?" she asked. "I'm sure. You're family now, Ellie. Family helps with the work." Rafe heated the brand, the H-bar mark, that had been on Hollister cattle for 30 years. When the iron glowed right, he nodded. "Hold it steady," Jacob said, guiding her hands on the handle. "Press firm, but not too hard. 3 seconds, then lift." The calf was secured by 2 hands. Ellie positioned the brand, took a breath, pressed. The hide sizzled. Smoke rose. She counted under her breath, 1, 2, 3, then lifted. Perfect. The H-bar stood clear and clean on the calf's flank. Rafe released the animal, and it scrambled back to its mother. Ellie stared at the mark, her heart pounding. "That's yours now," Jacob said. "Your mark means you're part of this ranch, part of this family. Forever." Ellie pulled off the gloves. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Something bigger. "Mr. Jacob, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why did you do it? Take me in. Fight for me. Risk everything." Her voice was quiet. "You didn't have to. Papa was already gone." Jacob knelt to her level, the way he always did when something mattered. "Your papa and I built this ranch together. Started with nothing but 300 head and more hope than sense. We made a deal back then we'd always look after each other's family. Always." He pulled the pocket watch from his vest, the one he'd carried since the trial, opened it to show her the engraving she'd traced 1,000 times. "Partner in all things," he read. "That's not just about cattle and land, Ellie. It's about keeping promises, about doing right by the people you love. But you didn't even know me. I knew your father. I knew what kind of man he was, what kind of daughter he'd raise." Jacob closed the watch, pressed it into her hands. "This was always meant to be yours. Your papa wanted you to have it when you were ready. I think you're ready now." Ellie's eyes burned. "But it says your name. And now it's yours, along with everything else that matters." She threw her arms around his neck, holding tight. He smelled like leather and horse, and the tobacco he sometimes smoked in the evening. He smelled like safety. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. Don't thank me, Ellie. Just keep being brave. Keep being kind. That's all the thanks I'll ever need. That evening after the branding was done, and the hands had headed to the bunkhouse, Ellie found herself on the front porch watching the sun go down. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, painting the mountains gold. Jacob settled beside her, coffee mug in hand. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. "Marcus left Montana," he said finally. "Marshall Garrett told me this morning. Took what money he had and went south. Colorado, maybe. Or New Mexico." "Good." Ellie's voice was firm. "I hope I never see him again." "You won't. Judge Kincaid's order makes it clear what happens if he comes back." More silence. A hawk circled overhead, hunting in the last light. "I've been thinking," Ellie said, "about the money, Papa's trust fund." "What about it?" "It's a lot, $18,000. She turned the watch over in her hands, tracing the engraving. "I was thinking when I'm grown I could use some of it to build a school. A real school with books and slates and a proper teacher. For ranch kids who can't get to town regular." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "That's a fine idea, Ellie. A real fine idea. Papa would have liked it, I think. His money helping other kids learn what I learned. He would have loved it. More than anything." Ellie looked up at him. "Will you help me when the time comes?" "I'll help you with anything you want to build. That's a promise." The sun touched the horizon. Somewhere in the barn, a horse whickered. The creek sang its endless song. "Mr. Jacob." "Yeah. Thank you for not giving up on me." He pulled her close, this child who wasn't his by blood, but was his by every measure that mattered. "Never could have, Ellie. Never could have. You're family, and family doesn't give up." They sat together as the stars came out, watching the first constellations appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, Martha was making supper. The smell of roast chicken drifted through the open windows. Rafe's guitar started up in the bunkhouse, playing something slow and sweet. This was home. This was family. Not the kind you were born into, but the kind you chose. The kind you built with promises kept and hard fights won, and the simple act of showing up when someone needed you. The weeks turned into months. Spring softened into summer. The ranch hummed with activity. Cattle drives, fence repairs, the endless work of keeping 2,000 acres running. Ellie threw herself into all of it. She learned to ride properly, not just sitting on a horse, but moving with it, feeling its rhythm in her bones. She learned to rope, to mend fence, to read the weather in the way clouds moved across the sky. And she kept learning to read. Martha had moved beyond the primer now. They worked through newspapers, ledgers, the Bible on Sundays. Ellie devoured words like a starving person, devoured food, hungry for everything she'd been denied. "You're reading at 6th grade level now," Martha said one afternoon, watching Ellie work through a complicated passage. "That's 3 years above where you started." "Is that good?" "That's remarkable. You've got a gift, Ellie. A real gift." "Uncle Marcus said I was slow." "Your uncle was a fool and a liar." Martha's voice was flat. "You're one of the smartest children I've ever taught. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Ellie smiled. It came easier now, smiling, laughing, trusting that the good things might last. In July, Sarah Bennett came to supper at the ranch. She'd been coming more often lately, bringing pies, helping Martha with preserves, sitting on the porch with Jacob while the sun went down. Ellie watched them together. The way Sarah laughed at Jacob's dry jokes. The way his face softened when she was near. "Are you going to marry her?" Ellie asked one evening after Sarah had gone home. Jacob nearly choked on his coffee. "What? Miss Sarah, are you going to marry her?" That's not..." He stopped, took a breath. "Why do you ask?" "Because you smile more when she's here, and Martha says you've been happier than you've been in years." Ellie shrugged. "I think she's nice. I wouldn't mind if she came to live here." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Would that be all right with you? If things changed, if Sarah became part of this family?" "She already is part of this family. She helped us win the trial. She stood up to Mrs. Henderson. She's been bringing us pies for months. Ellie grinned. I think you should ask her before someone else does. Jacob laughed a real laugh, the kind that came from deep in his chest. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you. He reached over and ruffled her hair. Smart aleck. That's what Rafe says. 3 weeks later, Jacob asked Sarah Bennett to marry him. She said yes before he finished the question. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends gathered in the ranch house on a golden September afternoon. Reverend Patterson performed the ceremony looking slightly uncomfortable. He'd been one of those who'd spoken against Jacob during the trial. But people could change. Ellie was learning that. Even people who'd been wrong could find their way to right. Sarah moved into the ranch house. She didn't try to replace Martha, just added to her fitting into the spaces that had been empty without anyone noticing. I always wanted a daughter, Sarah told Ellie one evening, braiding her hair by the fire. Jim and I tried for years, but it wasn't meant to be. And then he died, and I thought that dream was gone forever. And now I've got you. Sarah's hands were gentle in Ellie's hair. I know I'm not your mama. I'm not trying to be, but I'd like to be something if you'll let me. Ellie thought about it. About the mother she'd lost before she was old enough to remember. About the family she'd thought she'd never have. I think I'd like that, she said. I think I'd like that a lot. Winter came again, the first anniversary of the night Jacob had found her at the depot. Ellie stood at the window watching the snow fall. It was gentler this year, soft flakes drifting down like feathers, not the killing blizzard of 12 months ago. What are you thinking about? Jacob asked, coming to stand beside her. Last Christmas Eve, the depot. How cold I was. She touched the frost on the glass. I was sure I was going to die. But you didn't. Because you came. She turned to look at him. Why were you out that night in weather like that? Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I had a feeling. Can't explain it better than that. Just a feeling that something was wrong, that I needed to check the depot. Like your papa was talking to me somehow, telling me his girl needed help. Do you believe that papa sent you? I believe some things can't be explained. I believe love doesn't end just because someone dies. His hand found her shoulder. I believe your papa is still watching over you, Ellie. And I believe he's proud of the person you're becoming. Ellie leaned against him. I miss him. I know. I miss him too. But it doesn't hurt as much anymore. Is that wrong? No, sweetheart. That's healing. That's exactly what it's supposed to feel like. They stood together watching the snow fall while behind them, the house filled with warmth and light and the sounds of family getting ready for Christmas dinner. Marcus Crawford died in a boarding house in Santa Fe in the summer of 1891. Pneumonia, they said. No family claimed the body. He was buried in a pauper's grave with no marker and no mourners. When the news reached Montana, Ellie felt nothing. Not sadness, not satisfaction, just a quiet emptiness where hatred used to be. Is it wrong that I don't care? She asked Jacob. No, it just means you've moved on. You've built a life that doesn't include him anymore. Jacob's voice was gentle. That's not wrong, Ellie. That's freedom. The years passed the way years do, slowly, when you're living them quickly when you look back. Ellie grew tall and strong with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She finished her schooling at 14, top of her class, in a county competition that had boys 3 years older than her. At 15, she started helping Jacob with the ranch books. By 16, she could calculate cattle yields and profit margins faster than any hand on the spread. At 17, she got accepted to the Teachers College in Helena. Full scholarship based on her examination scores. I'm proud of you, Jacob said, reading the acceptance letter. His eyes were bright. So damn proud. I'm scared, Ellie admitted. I've never been away from the ranch. Never been anywhere, really. You'll be fine. You're Thomas Crawford's daughter. You can do anything you set your mind to. And if I fail, then you'll come home and we'll figure out what comes next. That's what family does." He pulled her into a hug. "But you won't fail, Ellie. You're too smart and too stubborn to fail." She went to Helena. She didn't fail. 4 years later, she came home with a teaching certificate and a mission. The trust fund had grown to $22,000 with interest. She used half of it to build a schoolhouse on Hollister land. 1 room at first, then 2. Then a proper academy with a bell tower and windows that caught the morning light. She taught literacy to ranch children, miners' kids, anyone who needed words to claim their voice. She never charged tuition. Said her papa's money should multiply in knowledge, not sit idle gathering dust. Judge William Kincaid came to the school's opening ceremony. He was old now, white-haired and frail, but his eyes were still sharp. "Your father would be proud," he told Ellie, shaking her hand. "He saved my son's life. You're saving the lives of dozens of children. The Crawford legacy continues." "Thank you, sir, for everything you did. I just followed the law and the truth. The credit belongs to the people who fought for both." He looked across the yard to where Jacob stood with Sarah, their arms linked, watching the children stream through the schoolhouse doors. "That man rode through a blizzard to save a child he'd never met," Kincaid said, "because of a promise made to a friend. That's the kind of courage you can't teach. You can only hope to learn it." "I'm trying," Ellie said. "I know you are. That's why I'm confident about the future." Jacob Hollister lived another 20 years. He saw Ellie graduate, saw her build her school, saw her marry a good man, a doctor from Helena who loved her and respected her and never once tried to dim her light. He was there when her first child was born. A boy. Thomas Jacob, named for the 2 men who'd made everything possible. "Hold him," Ellie said, placing the baby in Jacob's weathered arms. "He needs to meet his grandfather." Jacob looked down at the tiny face, and his eyes filled with tears. "I'm not his grandfather, not by blood. You're his grandfather by everything that matters." Ellie touched his arm. "Blood never meant anything, Jacob. You taught me that. Family is who shows up, who fights for you, who keeps their promises, even when it costs them everything." Jacob held the baby close, felt the weight of new life, new possibilities, new beginnings. "Your great-grandfather was a hero," he whispered to the child. "Thomas Crawford. Best man I ever knew. He saved my life, and I saved your grandmother's. And now here you are, carrying all of it forward." The baby opened his eyes, gray, like Ellie's, like Thomas's. Jacob smiled through his tears. "Welcome to the family, little one. Welcome home." Jacob Hollister died peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning in 1912. He was 80 years old. Sarah had passed 2 years before, and Ellie always said he was just waiting to join her. They buried him next to Sarah on a hill overlooking the ranch he'd built from nothing. Half the territory came to the funeral. Ranchers and merchants, teachers and students, everyone whose lives had been touched by Jacob Hollister's quiet kindness. Ellie spoke at the service. She was 52 now, gray at the temples, but her voice was strong as ever. "Jacob Hollister never thought of himself as a hero," she said. "He just thought he was keeping a promise, doing what any decent man would do." She looked out at the crowd, at her children and grandchildren, at the students she'd taught over 30 years at the community that had grown up around the school her father's money had built. But that's what heroes are, aren't they? Not people who think they're special, just people who show up when it matters, who do the right thing even when it's hard, who keep their word even when nobody's watching. She touched the pocket watch that hung around her neck, the same one her father had given her 40 years ago, the same one Jacob had pressed into her hands on a cold April morning. "Partner in all things," she read aloud. That was the inscription. That was the promise. And Jacob Hollister kept it until his very last breath. She looked up at the sky, blue and endless, the way it had been on that Christmas Eve, when a man on a horse had ridden through a blizzard to save a dying child. "Rest now, Jacob," she said softly. "Rest with Sarah. Rest with my papa. Rest with all the people who loved you." She closed her eyes. "Your work here is done, and what a work it was." The schoolhouse still stands on Hollister land. Third generation, now Ellie's great-grandchildren run it, teaching literacy to ranch kids and miners' children the way she taught their parents and grandparents. The depot where Ellie Crawford nearly froze to death was torn down decades ago. Wildflowers grow where it used to stand, yellow and purple and white, thick as hope. And in the little cemetery on the hill, 3 headstones stand together. Thomas Crawford, Jacob Hollister, Sarah Hollister, partners in all things, even in death. Some people say the Crawford-Hollister story is just a legend now, a tale that got taller in the telling. But the people who know better, the descendants who carry the name, the students who learned in the schoolhouse, the families who still work the land, they know the truth. They know that on a Christmas Eve in 1889, a man rode through a killing blizzard because of a promise made to a dying friend. They know that a little girl with 14 cents and a pocket watch lived to build a legacy that would outlast them all. They know that family isn't blood. It's who shows up when the snow is coming down and the lamp is burning out. It's who stays when staying costs everything. It's who keeps their word even when the world says they don't have to. Blood can abandon you on a depot platform. Blood can steal your future for whiskey debts and cards. But family, real family, rides through the storm. And that kind of love never freezes. That kind of love never dies.